Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you, and welcome everybody. Very excited to talk about the revision of the national content standards in K through 12 economics, I guess is what we're calling it now. And as most of you know, these were just released Wednesday, I think, is when they went live on the website. But this has been a two-year project. So about 2 years ago, I was approached by Chris Caltabiano at the Council for Economic Education, and he said, "Bill, would you be interested in doing leading the writing team that to revise what were called the voluntary national content standards in economics?" And I said, yes, I would be very happy to do that. And so it started on this project, and so it's been an interesting journey. Interestingly enough, right? There's changes in the title in the document. We took out the word voluntary because people all thought it was kind of redundant. We understand how the educational system here works in the United States. It's not a federal system where you have one set of standards everybody in the country has theirs. We understand that these are voluntary. And then at the very end, K through 12 was added in there, and so to emphasize that these are K through 12 things. That was interestingly enough that the last time I saw the document, we had taken it out, but then it reappeared. So somewhere along the line, it came back in, and I think it was to parallel what we've done on the personal finance side. So anyway, so good. So once again, just to sort of emphasize the importance of this document, when states or districts or schools look to sort of create content standards or try to, come up with, what should, we do in our state or organization in terms of what we should be teaching in economics, they look around for, well, what's out there, and this is what's out there, right? I mean, this is what people find. And we play the long game here, and I'll talk about this at the end. Not every state is going to revise their standards immediately, but over the next few years, as states start to revise, recreate, or redo their standards, this document will be in the room, hopefully. And so that's why this is an important resource for people to use. So with that, what I'm going to do is the following. Going to do some thank yous, of course, but then we're going to go into just sort of just the mechanics of sort of where did things go for those of you familiar with sort of the old standards, how did they move into the new standards, and then talk about some of the major changes with the standards, and then at the very end we'll talk about putting this into action, and so that's the last sort of bit that we'll talk about. My plan is to leave plenty of time for questions. So I don't really want to spend the time going just talk, but it will take a little while to get through some of this. So there's the writing committee. Of the folks, I guess, Scott, I bet you're the only one on right now. But Scott Wola is here with us. And so I thought it was a great team, and we worked well together in terms of, we peer reviewed each other's materials and whatnot. And so I think we really had a good diverse group of people from different organizations as well. So we had Marwa from the College Board, and we had Scott from the Federal Reserve, as well as people that you would recognize from the network and outside the network. So we had a balance of people. Yeah, he's not on. He wished he could be, but Chris Caltabiano was at the Council for Economic Education, was the project leader. He did a wonderful job. And then, of course, funding was provided by the Kazanjian Foundation, and we're always appreciative. And what people don't know is that if you look at the older versions of the standards, you will see that the Kazanjian Foundation also supported those efforts as well, and so that's much appreciated. So we're going to talk about what the goals were at the very beginning of the thing, and so some of you have seen my previous presentations will recognize this slide because it hasn't changed, and so Our initial thoughts were to streamline the standards if possible. Teachers wanted fewer standards. We've succeeded on the number of standards. It goes from 18 to or 20 down to 18, but the number of benchmarks is higher. So it's sort of a mixed bag on that. And I'll talk more about that later as well. Then we wanted to add content that has become more relevant the last 15 years, and I think we've been very successful in that. And when we see some of the revisions and we see how relevant they are to today's goings-ons in the economy, I think we will look even with 2 years, because a lot of this was done 2 years ago, that it was like we were looking in a crystal ball in terms of what we wanted to put in. And then also make sure that the stands had sort of a modern look. Certainly I must say it looks more modern in terms of its layout, but also then there's no references to yellow pages, which managed to survive the 2000 and whatever 11 or so revision. You would have thought that they would have gotten rid of the yellow pages, but they had not. So most of the things have been have a modern look. So here we go. So first I'm just going to give you a play-by-play of things. So if you look there, there's the picture. I've shown it a number of times, but I always like to say, this is what happened. So we literally pasted, every old benchmark onto an index card, and they were color coded, for grade level. And we decided we wanted to reorganize the old standards because, some of the things we understood what they were trying to do, but we thought that it just didn't work particularly well. For example, 7 and 8 mark, if you look, so the old standards, 7 was market and prices, and then 8 was prices. And, we just said, we understand what they wanted to do by just having prices separate, that it's a sort of a signal to people in the economy, but we just thought that those things needed to be combined. And so, because of spotting a number of those, and I'm going to go down each one here quickly and sort of give you a little quick debrief of our quick thoughts, and then I'll give more extensive comments in a little bit. We just thought the best thing to do was just to sort of see what we had in terms of the benchmarks and start off with a reorganization, and that's what we did, and I think that was really a good thing, including the physical thing of using the index cards. It just made it easier, as you can see, as we just sort of arrange things from one to another. So you can see what happened. So the old standards, for example, scarcity. And so what you have there, if you're looking at this table, oh, I guess I can mark things up here. Can I? Yeah, I can. I gotta. Okay. So you can see up here scarcity, and you can see that the components of scarcity were sort of divided up between scarcity and allocation and decision making. Decision making in the old one matched up with our new decision making pretty well, but you can also see then what happened is that allocation, in 3 became mixed in with scarcity. And then if you also see that, one of the things that we didn't, we thought kind of had to go together is decision making and incentives kind of have to go together. And so we put incentives into decision making. And so even though it looks like a, kind of a mess here, when you did it in the cards, a lot of this just fell out. We just thought that the logic went well. And then you can see here, the old standards were trade and specialization. And, once again, the old standards had, trade between people and individuals and international trade in the same standards. And we divided them up. And so you can see 5 and 6 were divided into 3 and 9, basically trade between people and trade between countries. Once again, I'll talk about that in just a bit. The 7 and 8, markets and prices, were combined into markets, as I previously had mentioned. And then we see things like competition and market structure. And we changed that to business decisions and market structure. And the reason we did that is that you can see entrepreneurship got moved, and I'll explain why, to, business decisions. So number five. So, we wanted to sort of put entrepreneurship and market structure all in one. With institutions, there was a separate standard about institutions. And once again, we saw what what the people who wrote the old standards wanted to do, but it's unlikely that we're going to see in a high school course, somebody teaching a unit on institutions per se. So, we scattered the institutions sort of, in the benchmarks where that institution made sense. So, I think some of the banking things were in institutions, and we moved them into the money and banking areas. Um, and then some of these things, whenever you see an and, we often divided them. So you saw money and inflation. So we have money and then inflation separate. Interest went into the banking, interest rates and financial markets. Income remained pretty much the same, except we relabeled it labor and income. I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. Um, you see, government failure, role of government and market failure has been moved into market failure and the role of government. And so I'll talk about that. And, once again, we're just going to go through, and then we'll talk more extensively about each of these changes. Um, and then government failure got moved into the role of government. So the role of government now features uh, role of government and then government failure in the same one. One thing I do like is that economic fluctuations we divide into GDP and then growth and fluctuations. And what I like is that we have one standard on GDP, where we have one standard on inflation, and you can see one standard on unemployment, right? So unemployment, inflation were divided into unemployment, inflation, and GDP. And then lastly, the last and that we got rid of was make monetary and fiscal policy two different standards. And so, this was, just, a massive reorganization. We did not write every benchmark. And in fact, one of the things I get kind of confused, people ask, where'd that come from? I'm like, oh man, I can't, is that something we wrote or something, that was there before? And more often than not, the vast majority of them are relatively unchanged, right? It's just been reorganized. So even though they have a different look, right? They have pretty much the same language on the benchmark level. And then we added technology, and once again, I'll talk about that in just a second, as far as what we wanted to do. So that gives you an idea of just the mechanics of the thing. Let's see if I can get rid of clear these drawings. See, oh look at this. I'm almost proficient in. We're in Teams, right? Yeah, Teams. Um, so the result is here, right? And so here are then the 8 standards. And you can see it. It looks more like a course, I think. You start off with sort of scarcity, allocation, decision making, specialization, exchange. That's your intro to economics. You have markets, business decisions, market failure, role of government, and then factor markets and trade, sort of your micro side. And then on the right-hand side, you have your macroeconomics. When the teacher asked me, was it on purpose that we're sort of 9 micro and 9 macro standards? No, it wasn't on purpose, and it's not that way in content. There are a whole lot of more benchmarks in the 1 through 9 than there are the 10 through 18. So it probably skews more as we would think it, with the heaviest standards in terms of benchmarks being in these earlier ones. So here's the debrief on sort of trying to anticipate some of your questions. So, so I have it labeled, yeah, why did you do that? Okay. And so here's why we did what. So I'm going to talk about, quote, the new standards. And these are in quotations because, I mean, nothing's really new except for technology. A lot of it is just, rearranged, and then there's, things added, but generally a lot of it's really the same stuff. Um, we have the new standards, international and technology, content change or expansion, that would be monetary policy, and talk about market failure, content recast, entrepreneurship and government failure, and then, I don't know, this was for Chris Caltabiano, baseball fan. He's not even here, but small ball changes, things that are small but make big differences, I think, in terms of the standards, in terms of improving them. So let's look at these. Um, so like I said, the international, instead of being mixed in with you know trade between people and specialization amongst people, we moved all the international stuff that was the benchmarks that were that mentioned countries being specialized, countries trading, and then anything on tariffs or exchange rates. We put it all into one international standard, and I think that's been a a great improvement in terms of particularly what we're talking about today, right? A lot about tariffs and trade and whatnot. And so, the new international standard looks like something that, if you want to organize a workshop, you would you can look at this and say, oh, well, here gives me all sorts of the ideas of things that I might want to do for an international workshop, in which, by the way, I'm 8 days from now, I have my international workshop, and so I was trying to think of what should I do. I said, it's right here, and so elementary school, exports, imports, interdependence, and we talk about trade making people better off, and then middle school, you talk more about the specialization, division of labor, gains from trade being unequal, reasons to restrict trade. In high school, you talk more about the technical comparative advantage, globalization, and then you do exchange rates. Exchange rates, were a controversy amongst the crew. Scott can nod his head. Um, uh, and you say, should they be? We were trying to debate whether we should have them on at the high school level, and I said we had to do that. I thought that we would have to have exchange rates. But yeah, so they are there. Um, Let's see here. And just give you an example. I mean, you obviously can read through the standards and things, but here's one that I think is something that is important today. So although trade barriers typically result in higher costs and benefits, they are often adopted through political processes and supported by people and groups who expect to gain from imposing them. Costs of the barriers are spread over a large number of people, with each person bearing only a small cost and possibly not recognizing the cost. So once again, just having all the international ones together, tells sort of the whole story of international trade, and yeah, and so I think we're going to have stronger standards for that. Um, and then we were sitting back and we were trying to sort of like, well, what should we add, right? What's, is it, because we're trying to think, we're going to modernize these things. What's the thing that we would like to sort of, think that's relevant today that maybe wasn't, expressed as much in the earlier standards, or it has or think something has become more prominent. And I'll give Marwa some credit for this. She came up with the idea of technology. And the thing is with technology, it's like, in the old standards, it's just an exogenous thing that does things, right? It just comes in and it shifts supply. It determines the pattern of trade. It's a driver of growth amongst a long list of other things. We don't really talk about sort of, you know, where technology comes from. We don't, in the old standards, really talk about the effects on jobs and people of potentially of changes in technology. And so, we added standards that we thought that was important. And we could not have been, more spot on. As you know, the Nobel Prize was given to three economists who worked on the area of technology, and so, and Kirsten Enflo, who was one of the announcers of the Nobel laureates, had this in her remarks. The laureates' work remind us that we should not take progress for granted. Instead, society must keep an eye on the factors that generate and sustain economic growth, i.e., technology. And so, I know that we were all tickled, at least I was, Scott was, Chris Caltabiano was tickled that, that the Nobel Prize would come out just a couple of days before our standards that sort of feature technology. And so to give you an idea, you can look at the standards themselves, but here's some of the ones that, I thought looked, that I find interesting. Technological advancements can expand, so this is middle school, can expand employment opportunities and job creation in innovative emerging industries. However, technology also carries the risk of job displacement for specific tasks to become automated or obsolete. So, once again, it addresses, some of the concerns with new technology. But it also talks about where technology comes from, which really wasn't spelled out in the previous one. The profit motive drives businesses to innovate and seek new technologies that improve efficiency and reduce costs. And then the government can support businesses' initiative to develop new technologies by funding research and development, providing tax incentives and subsidies, creating favorable environments, and investing in human capital. So it tells us sort of, where these technologies, they just are not these exogenous things, but talks about, businesses striving to come up with new innovations, but then also then, what can be done to sort of facilitate this, which in this international world, we're seeing, governments participating, more in sort of the development of technologies. And then, yes, and some of the implications of technology, in terms of, being helpful in gaps in education and improvement in economic well-being, but also the disparities that might be created, in the access and utilization of technology. And then 10H3, okay, I know this. Do not need to tell me this. You're saying, well, Bill, this looks like more an example of technology than something, because this looks just exactly what you just said before. And the only difference is here that you have artificial intelligence. So this really doesn't deserve to be its own benchmark, Bill. Don't you see that? And the answer is yes, I see it. I know it. But why did I want this? On the left-hand side, as we call it, because it says artificial intelligence, right? So yes, we felt it was very important to somewhere in our benchmarks have, artificial intelligence. And, I think we can pretty much are guaranteed that artificial intelligence is not going to be a flash in the pan technology like Pokemon Go or something like that. That people are still going to be using artificial intelligence. So we wanted to give it a good clean look, and so we put it in here. And yes, it's an example of technology that can transform the workforce, affecting the ways people approach various tasks and processes. It can enhance human capabilities and support certain tasks, boosting productivity, or it can serve as a replacement for specific tasks. AI can also create new job opportunities and lead to skill transformation. So we felt that, I'm fully aware that, the next revision, they'll probably move it to the right-hand side at some point. But we thought it was important to, get AI into the benchmarks and acknowledge that this is something that is happening now and is important to reflect that. And then we have monetary policy. And so we split monetary policy and fiscal policy. I think that was good because you looked at that last standard 20 in the old standards, and there was a lot of stuff in there. It was very cramped. And so the much better job, talking about the Federal Reserve System and the banking system, frankly, and the stock market, and there's a whole lot more. And so, well, stock market's another place, but a lot of things, are important. And so we see, yes, so we see that the Federal Reserve System, and it talks about the composition of the Fed in 17H1, and then the main thing here is 17H5. The Fed's primary monetary policy tool is the interest it pays banks to keep reserves at the Federal Reserve, called the interest on reserve balances, IORB. The Federal Reserve implements policy by using this interest rate to clear the federal funds rate, to steer the federal funds rate to the FMOC's target range. And so, yeah, we wanted these standards to clarify exactly what is currently being reflected. I was looking at my state's, standards, and they still have the old 3 discount rate and whatnot, money supply. This hopefully will nudge people to sort of bring in the things. Now I know what you're saying. Yeah, there's a fair amount on the Federal Reserve here, and I wonder why that is. Oh, look. Um, well, one of our writers was from the Federal Reserve, and mind you, it was well overdue, right? I mean, we really needed to spell out the Federal Reserve, but I'm going to give Scott Wall a shout out there, for help with those things.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Scott. You're welcome. Yeah. And so. So anyway, so yeah, but important, right, to get the monetary policy thing working there. Um, uh, then we had a thing called market failure, and the role of government was an old standard, and it when we were doing the cards, it just made sense to break it into two. So market failure, we nearly renamed it just market inefficiency. And we had a debate about that, and we kind of went old school and sort of took what we sort of grew up with as economists. And so but so any card that any benchmark that dealt with market failure, and representing an inefficiency in the market. So we're talking about externalities or lack of competition, lack of property rights. We put in public goods. They weren't there in before, and so we talked about all the sources of inefficiency, and then the role of government. We put in what the government might do about those, but also the other roles of government. You know, uh, in terms of, yeah, and then also the government failure, which those benchmarks, were put into the role of government. So we separated, which I think is something that you can think about quite easily. You know, you know, all the reasons that the market may fail, and then just all the different roles of government, including addressing market failure, but then also the fact that the government itself might not be functioning right. And so that was the division there. And then also, this is one of my favorite ones, since I put it in here. Governments enact economic policies or programs to achieve various goals such as efficiency, equity, stability, security, freedom, and growth. However, makers must face trade-offs between these goals when deciding, which policies or programs to pursue. And so, um, you know, old timers will recognize this from a very old, lesson. Um, and, the lesson I put in the high school book as well. So I revised the high school book, the orange book, for those, if you remember the color of those things. And you'll see a lesson. I think it's the last lesson in it. And they put it on Econ EdLink, and you know, I noticed that one year the council listed some of the most downloaded lessons, and it was this one. And so, so I said, geez, teachers like this lesson, and frankly, I like this lesson, that it talks about the trade-offs that policymakers face between these different competing goals. And sometimes they're competing, sometimes they're not, but oftentimes in policy there is. And I think it really helps in terms of helping the students frame some of the economic debates that we have in society, and that people can come up with different results and ideas, based on their ranking of the importance of these goals. So yeah, so that was in there. So that's kind of something that I think is important and newly added. Entrepreneurship. These were the entrepreneurship or benchmarks from the old one, and what we noticed is the following: entrepreneurs can compare expected benefits of enterprise with its cost, but we thought, well, businesses somehow do that too. If you go down, if you could replace all these here with the word businesses, for a lot of these things. And so we just decided we're going to emphasize entrepreneurship as taking risk of starting business and then the benefits and costs of being an entrepreneur. But then the rest of those we moved into just sort of the businesses in general, and I think we got a much better description of what businesses do, in the businesses and market structure thing. So entrepreneurship in the new standards, first of all, number one, we added it as a resource. So you have your usual three, and I forget, natural resources, human resources, and capital resources. But now we also have entrepreneurship listed. So we went to the four things, and you know. And we talk about what entrepreneurship does, right? And so happy with that, and once again talking about the incentives that entrepreneurs have in terms of being their own boss, achieving recognition, satisfaction, creating jobs, for example. And that some people, value independence. We also thought it was important to put in gig workers, freelancers, and contractors, right? People, who are sort of on that fringe. They're not necessarily, entrepreneurs per se, but nonetheless, aren't working for a business as well. So once again, sort of talking more of it makes a more modern look to the standards. And once again, I've addressed this a couple of times, but government failure was placed into the role of government. So there were six benchmarks. Three of them went to the role of government. One was on tariffs. I think it was the one I just read, actually. Went to international trade. Another one was put into the role of government with price ceilings as the example for it. And one was just a general one that we just didn't know what to do with. But so they were dispersed into mainly the role of government in terms of that. Um, and then when I talk about small ball, changes here, we're talking about things like the labor and income standard, which I like a lot now. We talk, first of all, to earn income, people sell productive resources. And we talk, more, about, so the old benchmark just said these include their labor, capital, natural resource, entrepreneurial talents. So actually, in the old standards, in one place they had three resources, and here they're kind of implying a fourth, so we cleared that up. And then we went ahead and described natural resources and the reward to those, capital resources, the reward to those, and then entrepreneurship, the reward to that. And so, so that, does a much bigger job in terms of describing income and where income can come from, other than just work. And then, added things. Somebody came up with the idea of talking about, labor, leisure trade-offs and work-life balance kind of choices. So we added that as far as in that area as well. And then another added thing, network effects, which I think do resonate with young people because they do see these websites that Amazon or Facebook or LinkedIn that that have these network effects, and it explains, a lot in terms of, why we see concentration of control of things by a few firms. A lot of it is network effects going on. So industries with products that have network effects, key of control resources, property rights, have fewer firms and therefore less competition. So, once again, we talk about the effects. And so, once again, talking, economic idea, um, that will help students understand more of what they see in the world today. Um, and then the last thing, and this is the end of the debrief here. We spent a lot of time to the right-hand side. And so, so those of you who are aware of the standards, we have over here, students will know that's our content standard. Use this knowledge to be able to do something. And, this side, we, we sent these out to a lot of reviewers, and and a lot of them were told, look on the left, we're really interested in the content. And people were happy with the content, but people had tons of ideas about the right hand side. And so, the right hand side, it became apparent that we really needed to work on those, and we did. And so, and I've talked about, that we had the folks at the Georgia Fed and the Georgia Council in one place, and so I went up there, and we went through, and we sort of made sure that that what was done on the right-hand side matched what was on the left-hand side, which wasn't the case in the, sometimes it seemed like, what they had done is on the left-hand side, they had an idea, and on the right-hand side, they wanted to add more to the idea. And that's not the point, right? You're supposed to address what was specifically done. So we tried to really work and get those improved. And also because of, I worked on the in my state, I worked on the financial literacy standards, and I saw how much they were using the right-hand side as examples, as way of formulating other things for their standards and give examples, that I realized it really is important and used, by the states. And so we spent, time to make sure that we got those right. Um, Now I know what you're saying. You're saying, "Oh gosh, you've rearranged these whole things, and how are we going to do these?" I did do crosswalks, right? And we're gonna, send those out to folks. That's something Joel and Kathy, we're gonna have to figure out how I have the PDF, and we got to get it to everybody. So those are out for release. Um, 3 times. So this is what you're seeing. So you're saying, Bill, is that your crosswork? That's what. No, I'm not giving you that. No, 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 no. I'm giving you some. But 3 times. The red is the first go through, and on the right, that's the second go through. You see some changes, and the middle one was my final check to make sure that they all sort of match up. So I'm pretty sure they're right in terms of getting into the right place. So yeah, this is what your crosswalk will look like. You'll have the old standard, the old grade level, the old benchmark, and the old benchmark working. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to get the new standard number, the new grade, and the new benchmark. We didn't put the wording in just because of copyright things and the new standards. They want people to go to the new document, but it will give you good guidance in terms of going from the old to the new. And you've already actually seen the benchmark at the standard level. I was referring to that earlier. But that is also, if you want to just do it by, from standard to standard, that's also the case. So my Rosie retrospection, I've been doing behavioral economics in my classes, teaching in my, is part of my, what I teach now. And so I was talking to my class about Rosie retrospection, looking back over the last 2 years, and what are my conclusions? I think, yeah, better standards, no doubt. I really think we've improved them. This is a move forward. I think you will have issues. That's great. I mean, that, it's, there will be, things that you're going to disagree with, things you're going to say, oh, you left that out. I mean, that I'm happy with, and it's okay, right? And that's the last thing. These are guidelines. Take what you like, leave what you don't. And having been on state on a couple of state standards revisions committees now, I know that's what they do, right? They get the committee there and they go, "Oh, that looks good," and they look at another one, "No, we don't like that," and then they're adding their own things. So what I want is the document to be in the room when people are making these decisions, and I think that's, and once that happens, you know, the work is done. Then it's up to the states and districts and stuff to decide, how they want to frame, their own personal standards, and that's really, how it should be, right? At least my understanding of the U.S. educational system. Um, so yeah, uh, go forth. Yeah, sorry, we rearranged things a lot, but the crosswalk will help. Go out there, teach the new stuff, international technology, new concepts. I know it's like network effects. We don't have a lesson on network effects. Actually, I do. I've been working on one. And I actually had a teacher try it. I did it at a workshop just to experiment, and they actually did. And they came back. They said it worked okay. So I was like, oh, thank you. But yeah, it's got to do those and then promote them in your new state, right? In your states. I've already sent this morning. I sent out something to the Florida DOE people saying, "Hey, they're out, and we need to revise ours." Once again, we won't get 100% word for word adoption. Just be in the room, and the work there is done. And so with that, questions, and I went over a little bit, but left hefty time for questions.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Yep.
Yes, questions are just going to be open your mic, ask the question, or put it in the chat. But I did take note of who is here. I have the emails, so anything that Bill wants to make sure this group gets, we will send a follow-up email for sure.
Yeah, and right after this, I'll send out the PDF to you, and then you can forward to everybody who's on this. Yeah, it's GDP. Oh, did I put gross national product in my slide? Oh well. Oh yeah. Oh well. No, it's GDP. Thank you for catching that. That goes to show how old I am, though.
Bill, Derek has a question in the chat. Maybe you want to just take a look.
Okay, yeah. Let's see here. Well, no, but Derek, it wasn't removed. I mean, it's been moved into sort of the role of government. So yeah, so not removed. I mean, the benchmarks are there. They've been placed within, the role of government. And once again, it was because I wanted. I mean, so we wanted to separate sort of the technical. Why do externalities you know, uh, and public goods affect efficiency in one, and then everything the government, everything sort of about the government in sort of one place, including, why they might have, government failure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure Derek does too. I always like the balance of government failure and market failure because to me, it made us look balanced. It looked like we're not, we'll be negative about the government when we need to be, and we'll be, you know, I don't know. I just think we were
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
obviously presenting both points of view. Is there any public choice theory in here at all?
well, to the extent that, there was in in the old benchmarks got carried over. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, just because I don't, and forgive my ignorance on not knowing everything about the new standards yet, and not knowing that it was, integrated in the role of government.
Yeah.
Do we get into the incentives within the political system for decision making and things within that role of government?
Some of the aspects are, remember that the old standards had total of 6 benchmarks in that, government failure section. It was not a lot of benchmarks to start with. And so those were moved into, the role of government. That's another reason why, even though, I mean, you sort of like to see, have that sort of, the balance, but there wasn't in terms of number of benchmarks and things. But all the other, but the other, the ones were there were just moved over.
Bill, are you sure that all the benchmarks that were in government failure are in the new one? Because
Ex, ex,
I see
ex,
that
ex,
some were removed.
except for one was rather vague, and so that one didn't get moved, but the others were. I mean, some one of them was moved into the international section because it was talking about tariffs.
And also, I don't find the public choice component
To
with the
the
change.
to the extent that it was there before. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
But that's precisely, I think, the issue of the balance between market failure and government failure. In fact, you look at the
Well,
standards and government failure doesn't appear anywhere, and it seems like
well,
you have been demoted. You have demoted the topic before it was more balanced.
well, part of me doesn't, part of me is now, one of the things in retrospect, when we had that debate between, you know, market inefficiency and market failure, I wish I'd, now, I mean, I'm looking at Scott, maybe it would have been better to say market inefficiencies. Because I mean, I don't like this idea of, market failure, government failure. You know, you see what I'm saying? I mean, in terms of the semantics of it.
Yeah, but you could have called government inefficiencies and market inefficiencies. That's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Once again, it's, an organizational thing. I just wanted one thing describing what is pure market stuff, right? I mean, you can talk about inefficiencies, as, yeah, I know. Yeah, and Mark, yeah, Derek's coming back. Yeah, I agree. Um, yeah, but to talk about just, technically why, the market has inefficiency, and for better or for worse, I tried to, we tried to put in, what inefficiency is, which at the high school level might be really quite hard, right? And yeah, and I agree with Gerard there. Yeah, it's standard lingo, unfortunately. Yeah, and once again, maybe I could redo that, maybe perhaps. But on the right hand, but on the other side, talk about all the roles of government, including this idea of government failure, including the most important one is that, I mean, the benchmark that, sometimes the costs of government intervention outweigh the benefits. I mean, that's there, and I think that's one of the most important ones. So yeah, you know, yeah, that's what I'll, Otherwise, I'll just start repeating myself. Oh, Scott, so you have something on network effects. Any other questions?
Bill, just trying to give other people a chance to talk, but since
Sure.
nobody was chiming in, I guess I was just
Okay.
wanted to know who, because I know you and Scott were in the room, kind of
Right.
with the index cards, right? That big day.
Well, you have pictures of everybody there. I'm taking the picture, so everybody who was in the room is there.
Yeah, I just don't know who was everybody that was there.
Huh? Oh, the writers. So
Who were they? I'm sorry. Are they just on the document there for us to look at?
yeah, they're on the document, but here they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
This is more of just a comment. I think that there has been a real effort to incorporate data literacy in the new standards, and so that does seem to be a real improvement. I guess I'm curious, will there be a coordinated public service announcement type effort how does information about these new standards get disseminated down from the network at this point? I wonder how intentional we are about communicating these changes at this point, now that the work is done.
Well, the work is done. So for example, this is the first stop. I mean, so the good news is NIE is the first stop here. Yay. And well, only because Joel and Kathy got me scheduled first. But yeah, but yay.
It was all Joel. Thanks, Joel.
And and then 1 week from today, there'll be a webinar that is going to be done by the National Council. You probably got advertisements for that. That won't be as technical as that one, as this one. You know, that's a good question though. And in some sense, it's going to rely on, us, NIE, to go ahead and, advocate, for the standards, and reach out to our DOEs and say, hey, we have this updated document, and use it like I've just used it today. I use it as an event. Oh, hey, state of Florida, it's time to redo our standards. Ours are looking a little old, and there's new ones that that might give us some ideas of some of the changes that we might need. So a lot of what the national standards do is provide us an opening to sort of reach out to the folks. And so, yeah, I think it's up to like NIE. I know that the Council for Economic Education is going to they put out some things as well. But
yeah, I wonder if
yeah,
the committee may have some opportunity here to generate a statement. I know that within the standards there's a very nice opening statement that helps to overview some of these changes, and perhaps we can work together within the NIE community to articulate some of these key points that you've highlighted. I know there's a new AP Business Principles course coming online. We've got the term business highlighted within the new standards some 60 times. But like you pointed out, Bill, that term entrepreneurship is focused on, in a spot where, businesses and firms might be easily substituted. So maybe just highlighting some of these key points for some of the up and coming courses, and to make this an easy interpretation. As you know, the crosswalk is helpful, but still very complex to digest. So, but thank you for your work, Bill, and for your time today to share this and answer these questions as well.
okay.
And I'm going to take a quick second just to remind everyone that we do have a shared calendar, and I'm going to drop in the chat at this time. This is one of the initiatives of this committee to refresh the efforts to consolidate information about relevant economics and personal finance, in particular training events that your centers or councils may have on the books. Any information you share through the form is what we'll post. So if only the most relevant information, I suppose, if you're trying to exclude to a state or region, a regional audience, please don't share information in the shared calendar. But for the good of the states collectively, or the econ ed community collectively, please do submit things. We have yet to have a single submission to the shared calendar. There are some people taking initiative, which like Econiful, we appreciate that. But yes, please do contribute if you have events that would benefit affiliated partners and at-large groups, etc. Are there any other questions in the chat, Kathy, that I have overlooked?